Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp, conservative union chairman Matt Schlapp, and conservative commentator Monica Crowley. Okay, your thoughts on this, Monica? Where are we?
Well, look, I voters are incredibly disappointed by what we're seeing. I think they're outraged by what we're seeing. As you pointed out, they've had 8 years to get their act together on this. Voters expect the Republican Party to just do a few things well, Sean. Tax reform in the economy, national security, and repealing and replacing Obamacare. Why? Because when you're talking about Obamacare, it's not just the specifics of health care reform, which we do need. It gets to the core issues of individual freedom and the role and scope of government. That's what made it so important to Barack Obama and the left to make sure that that was the first thing that they did when Obama came into office and they had those huge majorities. Voters sent Republicans in wave elections in 2010, 2014, where they flipped the House and the Senate, gave them total control. And you know what? It was primarily driven by a reaction against Obamacare and the Republicans' promises to repeal and replace it.
Let me move the ball. I agree with all of that. And this was so poorly managed from the get-go, Mercedes, because no consensus was built. Nobody saw the bill beforehand. And frankly, the person that ended up having to do the heavy lift was a president, and that really is the job of the speaker and the legislative branch and the leadership. With that said, can this be saved? For example, the president making a side agreement in a letter that phase 2 will give the Freedom Caucus the things that they want, that they said they need to get this bill passed. Is that good enough, in your opinion? Will that get it done?
Surely, I think that you must give credit to President Trump for time and time again bringing in these conservative members to the White House, getting to a point where, although they're not all quite there yet, but moving the ball forward. So I think it shows two things. One, that the conservative caucus is incredibly powerful in moving this legislation and shaping this legislation, with the case of being led by the Freedom Caucus and the Republican Committee. But also, Sean, I think that it's imperative for Republicans to decide to find compromise, to find consensus, and to pass this legislation, because this is going to be critical for the president to have this victory, this legislative victory, and that will determine how his future legislative agenda will shape up.
I think that's well said.
If he can bring the Republicans all, to agree and make this significant change and get rid of Obamacare.
Well, look, I've known the president for over 2 decades, and I found him always to be a person of his word. That's my experience, and I would say that to every Freedom Caucus member. If he gave you his promise, his word, I absolutely believe him. Now, if it was the leadership in Congress, if it was McConnell or any of these other guys, I'd be squirrely. Matt, how does this get done from here? The Freedom Caucus is meeting right now as we speak, and they're discussing the president's letter, and they're discussing whether or not that's enough for them. And they're going to be the deciding voice at the end of this process. They have moved the ball forward in a lot of different ways. Is it enough, do you think?
Yeah, look, I think Mark Meadows and the Freedom Caucus has done a spectacular job. They have made great improvements in this bill. You are right, Sean. People like me who run conservative groups were not consulted. We were not brought in. Conservative members of Congress were left out in the cold. This was hatched in the leadership office. It's offensive to the heart and soul of the Republican Party, which is the conservative movement. That being said, this is merely the first step. This bill will not become law. I can guarantee you that. All this does is advance the process. The question about what Secretary Price can and cannot do, as you know,
well, there were 1,442. The secretary shall, the secretary may, within the bill. In other words, there's very broad discretion in the current bill that they would have the ability. He would have the ability to make the changes. But he's, but I think where the conservatives. By the way, I agree with you. I think the president, if this has any chance of passing, it's because of his hard work, him being open to talking to all these groups. He deserves all that credit, but that should have been done before it was ever rolled out. So he was put in an untenable position, in my opinion. But with that said, we always get the tax increase. We never get the spending cuts. We always get the amnesty. We never get the wall built. And I think there's always a trust issue. But I trust the president. That's my experience with him.
I trust the president, too. I just worry about this process being phased in over 3 different phases, because I think the American people have been burnt by leaders, especially in the Republican establishment, time and again, promising one thing and failing to deliver. So when they say we're going to give you our word on phases 2 and 3, forgive the American people for being very skeptical about
Last word, Mercedes. We have about 20 seconds.
But obviously, phase 3 is going to be probably the most complicated part of this because you're going to need the 60 votes in the Senate. This is where we're going to see President Trump, where he's going to have not only the art of the deal, but being able to try to negotiate and bring in Democrats into the fold. Now that, Sean, is going to be incredibly difficult.
Under Chuck Schumer that said that they're going to filibuster.
I'm not counting on Schumer. I'm thinking about my moderate Democrats.
Too.
Yeah.
The moderate Democrats, yes.
Thank you both for